Pakistan, Lebanon, Malaysia, Maldives, Mexico, Morocco, Namibia, Norway, the Philippines, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, the Syrian Arab Republic, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Tunisia, Turkey, Uganda, United Arab Emirates, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and Vietnam to participate in this meeting. It's so decided. I propose that the Council invite the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in this meeting in accordance with the provisional rules of procedure and the previous practice in this regard. There be no objection. It's so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's provisional rules of procedure, I invite Mr. Ramirez Al-Akbarov, the Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process and United Nations Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, to participate in this meeting. It's so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's provisional rules of procedure, I also invite the following to participate in this meeting: His Excellency, Mr. Jaime Hermida Castillo, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. His Excellency, Mr. Stavros Lamberdinis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, and His Excellency, Mr. Majid Abdulaziz, Permanent Observer of the Permanent Observer Mission of the League of the Arab States to the United Nations. It's so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of the item 2 of the agenda. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Ramiz Al-Akbarov.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, Excellencies, I brief you today at the moment of both profound opportunity and considerable risk. In front of us, we see a potential turning point for Gaza, a genuine chance for a better future. But many uncertainties remain. In parallel, we also see a continued unraveling in the occupied West Bank and a region mired in tension. The announced start of the second phase of the President Trump's 20-point plan, comprehensive plan, is a critical step in consolidating the ceasefire in Gaza, alongside the establishment of subsidiary bodies of the Board of Peace, including the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza and the Office of the High Representative for Gaza. I have just returned from Cairo, where I met with the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza to discuss how the United Nations can best support the committee's effort to provide critical public services, facilitate humanitarian aid, and lay the groundwork for reconstruction in Gaza, in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 2803. The task at hand is monumental. It requires full coordination among all stakeholders, taking into account the existing systems and capacities. The United Nations stands ready to support the committee and the Palestinians in Gaza as they start the arduous work of rebuilding. I welcome the recovery of the last hostage in Gaza, and I'm relieved that they have been returned to Israel for burial. I extend my condolences to the family of Ran Gvili. With all hostages returned, I hope that the process of healing for the families of all of those affected may begin. Implementation of the next phase of the comprehensive plan must advance in good faith. I'm encouraged by Israel's announcement on 25th January that Rafah crossing will open to pedestrian movements in both directions. Demilitarization of the Gaza Strip is essential to enable conditions and security arrangements that are urgently required to facilitate the work of the National Committee across the entire street. Mr. President, my last visit to Gaza affirmed one truth. The people in Gaza are ready and eager to lead the way to a better, more stable future. Less than 2 weeks ago, amidst enormous misery and pain, I witnessed inspiring resilience and hope. Youths taking their exams and excelling in the most difficult of circumstances. Farmers who are unable to import seeds, but still finding ways to plant greenhouses repaired with makeshift materials, and small business owners devising ingenious solutions when faced with scarce materials and a devastated market. Such efforts are being replicated across Gaza. They deserve our support. But nevertheless, nearly the entire population in Gaza remains in need of humanitarian assistance. Heavy rainfall and cold temperatures has exacerbated the suffering of more than 1.5 million displaced Palestinians in Gaza, who had little or no means to seek safe shelter. I heard firsthand how families sat vigil through the night just trying to hold down the four corners of their tents. I saw a little girl carrying heavy stones just to prevent her shelter from blowing away in the wind. I don't know her age, but she looked to me being just 4-year-old. The shelter response has suffered from restrictions for the entry of vital materials and technical expertise. As a result, shelter sites in Gaza do not meet the scale of the needs or international standards. Transitional shelter sites must provide access to much needed essential services. Above all, they must be voluntary and dignified and in line with humanitarian principles. The support of all stakeholders is needed. Mr. President, across all sectors, humanitarian actors are still unable to operate at scale in Gaza. Their work is being hindered by insecurity, custom clearance challenges, the limited number of partners authorized by Israeli authorities to bring cargo into Gaza, delays and denials of cargoes at crossing, and limited routes available for transporting supplies within Gaza. While the Jordan corridor remains a humanitarian lifeline, current volumes entering Gaza through back-to-back arrangements represent only a fraction of what was previously achieved when the direct route was operational. Since 10 October, only 9% of 2720 processed aid has entered Gaza via Jordan. Fully utilizing existing proven regional corridors remains essential to saving lives in Gaza. Entry of mobile homes, rescue equipment, fuel, and medical supplies continues to be severely restricted, endangering the lives of tens of thousands of IDPs and patients. To address this, materials must enter at scale. Access to public infrastructure and agricultural land remains restricted. Meanwhile, regular detonations of residential buildings are continued and repeated population displacements have occurred. On 30th December, Israel announced its plans to suspend the operations of some international NGOs. The government also notified 37 NGOs that their registration would expire at the end of 2025 due to what Israel says is the failure to comply with the new regulations, triggering a 60-day review period. Banning these NGOs will have a significant impact on the humanitarian response across the OPT. I urge Israel to immediately reverse this decision. Despite the ceasefire, the Israeli military continues to conduct military operations with airstrikes, shelling, and gunfire occurring across the street. Armed exchanges also persisted with Palestinian militants. Attacks in the vicinity or of or beyond of so-called yellow line are happening daily, and hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire began, including many women and children. Civilians must be protected at all times. Amid the obstacles, we also have seen some welcome actions. The continued arrival of aid via Egypt, Jordan, Israel, occupied West Bank, and Cyprus has been critical. This has helped increase the volume of supplies brought into Gaza and led to improvements in nutrition status of the population. But more needs to be done. Mr. President, I would like to devote a reminder of my briefing to addressing the spiraling dynamics in the occupied West Bank. Every month, the United Nations and many others in this Council emphasize the gravity of the unfolding situation. but that has yet to translate into meaningful action on the ground. Negative trends are entrenched daily. The reporting period was marked by continued violence with extensive Israeli military operations, settlement expansion, settler violence, demolition, and large-scale detentions. In late December and early January, Israeli forces conducted intensified raids across Jenin, Nablus, Hebron, and Ramallah, frequently involving live fire and raising serious concerns about the use of lethal force. A 16-year-old boy was shot and killed during a raid in Kabatia on 20th December and after reportedly throwing a brick toward an IDF soldier. And multiple Palestinians were killed or fatally wounded during the operation south of Nablus. There have been large-scale arrest campaigns of Palestinians by Israeli security forces, including children, amidst reports of ill treatment and torture and continued deaths in custody. Palestinian attacks against Israelis have also persisted. On 26 December, a Palestinian man killed 2 Israelis, including a woman, in 2 ramming and stabbing attacks in northern Israel. At the same time, settler violence intensified. In December, repeated settler attacks led to the displacement of the entire community of Hirbet Yanun in Nablus Governorate, and in January we saw the forcible displacement of some 80 households from Ras Ain Auja in Jericho Governorate. Demolitions and large-scale land seizures continued across the northern West Bank. Evictions in East Jerusalem's Silvan neighborhood on 4th January and extensive demolitions in Tul Karam Nur Shams refugee camp at the end of December underscore how violence, displacement, and territorial fragmentation are converging on the ground. Meanwhile, settlement expansion has been rapid and relentless. The combination of settlement advancement, state land declarations, and persistent establishment of outposts is carving up and making vast swaths of land inaccessible for Palestinian use in the occupied West Bank. During the reporting period, approximately 1,860 housing units were advanced in the Area C. This includes 120 housing units at Sanur, a settlement that was evacuated in 2005. Additionally, 2,850 housing units were advanced in East Jerusalem. These include 2 large-scale plans, a plan for 1,500 housing units in residential towers in a government complex between Sheikh Jarrah and Mount Scopus, and a plan in East Talpiot for 950 housing units in several residential towers. The Israeli government has also published tenders for over 4,770 in Area C, including 3,401 housing units in E1, which, if built, would effectively sever the connection between the northern and southern West Bank. In recent weeks, the pressure campaign against UNRWA has also sharply escalated in an effort to end its operation in the occupied Palestinian territory. On 29 December, the Israeli Knesset passed legislation instructing Israeli authorities to seize UNRWA's compound in Sheikh Jarrah and Kafr Akab, and requiring utilities and financial service providers to deny service to UNRWA or any of its facilities. On 12 January, Israeli forces raided an UNRWA health center in occupied East Jerusalem and ordered it to close. A week later, Israeli forces forcibly entered the UNRWA headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem with bulldozers demolishing the buildings, and officials have made abhorrent calls for the annihilation of UNRWA staff. These acts are flagrant violation of international law and the privileges and immunities of the United Nations. I call on the Israeli government to abide by the October 2025 advisory opinion by International Court of Justice, which states that Israel is obliged under international law to facilitate UNRWA's operations, not hinder or prevent them. Despite significant increases in international support in 2025, the unilateral withholding by Israel of all Palestinian clearance revenues continues. The Palestinian Authority continues to face the growing fiscal crisis resulting in partial payment of civil servant salaries and a reduction in services. Nearly $2.5 billion of clearance revenues remains withheld by Israel. Mr. President, Israeli government policies have facilitated a number of destructive trends: rapid settlement expansion and its related infrastructure, the creation and legalization of outposts, widespread demolitions and displacements, state land declarations, deepening movement and access restrictions, and expansion of municipal boundaries. Persistent and extreme settlers' violence, frequently accompanied or supported by Israeli security forces, continues to inflame tensions, forcibly displace Palestinians, and exacerbate instability. The consequences have been severe, deepening the occupation, fragmenting Palestinian space, and strengthened territorial contiguity for settlement. And ultimately, these steps are further undermining the prospects for peace and the establishment of a two-state solution. Unless urgently addressed, they may also jeopardize progress on implementing the second phase of the ceasefire agreement. Mr. President, the implementation of the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan is critical and will require our firm and collective commitment. There is a genuine opportunity to lay the foundations for a more stable and secure future for Palestinians and Israelis, and advance the goal of legitimate Palestinian government that reunifies Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and chart a course toward ending the occupation and advancing a political process that will ultimately end the conflict. The UN will continue to support Palestinians and Israelis to end the conflict and to realize a two-state solution in line with previous United Nations resolutions and international law. Mr. President, I thank you and this Council for your attention.
I thank Mr. Alakbarov for his briefings. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to thank you for presiding over this open debate at such a pivotal moment for peace, justice, and human dignity. Allow me also to welcome the ministers who are with us, to thank Mr. Ramiz Al-Akbarov for his briefing, and to welcome again our friends, the 5 elected new members of the Security Council, Bahrain, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Latvia, and Liberia. 80 years after the end of the Second World War, the core principles upon which the United Nations were founded remain as critical as ever. The right of peoples to self-determination, the prohibition on the acquisition of territory by threat or use of force, and the rule of international law as the guarantor of the rights of individuals, regardless of race, religion, or nationality, and of nations, large and small. Those principles are the expression of the wisdom finally acquired by humanity following a devastating war, where peoples around the globe endured and witnessed aggression, genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes on a scale that altered the course of history and led to the founding of these United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to ensure international peace and security. It is these very principles that are at stake and under threat in Palestine. Asserting them there is upholding them everywhere. Abandoning them there is jeopardizing them everywhere. Mr. President, we welcome the ceasefire agreement reached last year under President Trump's plan, and we commend the personal engagement of President Trump and the US administration, as well as the tireless efforts of the mediators who have worked to implement it. We supported the ceasefire in good faith, even in the face of repeated breaches, with at least 500 Palestinians killed since the ceasefire came into effect, with many more wounded and ongoing destruction by the occupying power, and while life-saving assistance, including shelter, continues to be obstructed in the depths of this harsh winter. We support the plan because it offered an immediate path toward ending the killing and suffering, the famine, and unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe inflicted on the Palestinian people in Gaza. While we recognize that thousands of lives have been saved by the ceasefire, these goals are yet to be fully achieved. We welcome the completion of the release of all Israeli hostages and prisoners alive and deceased, including the recovery of the remains of the last Israeli body 2 days ago. We had repeatedly said that only a ceasefire could allow for this to happen. Yet, we must ask, what about the countless Palestinian families whose loved ones have been killed, with thousands of bodies still crushed and buried under rubble, yet to be found, yet to be identified, and to be given dignified burial? What of the families who waited for the return of thousands denied, tortured, humiliated, starved, raped, or missing, raped or missing? What of the entire families obliterated from existence, or the survivors of genocide left with grave injuries and amputations, who will carry the devastation with them for all their lives? What of the trauma and loss of an entire people? The suffering of the Palestinian people, civilian men, women, and children, must be ended with equal urgency. Healing, recovery, and justice are indispensable and a right for all. Full implementation of Phase 1 obligations, including an immediate end to the killing and unrestricted humanitarian access across the Gaza Strip, is essential. These are not new demands. They are the repeated calls of this Council and constitute obligations under international law. Moreover, Israel must end its ongoing war against humanitarian actors, including UNRWA and vital NGOs, whose safety and ability to operate have been repeatedly undermined. The destruction of UNRWA facilities, including the seizure and destruction of its headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem, which was also set ablaze, and the targeting of humanitarian personnel, and now the attempt to ban and expel recognized and respected NGOs operating on Palestinian territory, demonstrate total contempt for the very mechanisms established to protect and assist civilians. It is an attack on the United Nations by one of its members in ways we had never witnessed before. The advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on Israel's humanitarian obligations must be fully respected. But instead of compliance, we have witnessed continued obstruction to aid delivery, continued violations of the Charter and Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, and continued grave breaches of international humanitarian law by the occupying power. In this regard, we call the letters of the Secretary General to the Security Council, to you, and General Assembly, including that in light of the gravity of the Israeli government's actions, and I quote, "A situation may exist in which a difference has arisen between the United Nations and the State of Israel regarding, among other things, the interpretation or application of the General Convention," end of quotation of the letter of the SG. Furthermore, we are obliged to underscore yet again, Israel is not the sovereign in the Palestinian territory. This illegal occupation has no rights whatsoever in occupied Palestine, including in Jerusalem. Mr. President, the ceasefire's permanence and success requires that Israel cease trying to dictate the future of Gaza and to fully withdraw from the territory. Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. I repeat, Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. It belongs to the Palestinian people, nobody else. And any transitional arrangements must fully respect our people's rights and our sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territory. The Gaza Strip must be reunited with the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, without delay. And our people's right to self-determination and independent statehood, enshrined in the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, which I began with, and in numerous resolutions of the Security Council, General Assembly, ICJ rulings, and in peremptory norms of international law, cannot be disposed of. Israel has to abandon its plans to forcibly displace and replace our people across occupied Palestine. In the West Bank, Israeli military attacks and settler terrorism continue unabated, systematically driving Palestinians from their homes. Settlements continue to be advanced, all tools of rampant annexation. In this regard, we warn of the dangerous Israeli escalation against Palestinian cities, villages, and refugee camps in the West Bank, including the implementation of the so-called E1 settlement project. This must be stopped. The last families in Ras Ain al-Auja have been forced from their land, leaving no Palestinian presence in what was once a thriving community. This was the largest shepherding community in the southern Jordan Valley and the last to survive Israelis' ethnic cleansing in the area. United Nations reporting has now documented a record level of West Bank displacement in the last 2 years. Around 40,000 Palestinians violently and forcefully transferred from their homes, the highest figure ever since 1967. Despite the long-standing demands by the international community, including the Security Council for decades, for a halt to such illegal colonial practices, Israel persists with its impunity, entrenching its illegal occupation of our land and people every single day. This must be stopped. Mr. President, these events are not isolated. They are part of a sustained pattern that threatens not only the Palestinian people, but the foundational principles of this organization. This cannot be ignored. Yet, we still see a chance for peace. I repeat, yet we still see a chance for peace. A real historical opportunity to end the occupation, to realize Palestinian rights, to achieve just and lasting peace in accordance with international law and UN resolutions. The Palestinian Authority is working in impossible circumstances to uphold its responsibilities. It is working to retrieve the bodies of Palestinians, to restore education, to revive the health sector, to provide shelter and assistance, to reopen the Rafah crossing in both directions, to prepare for recovery and reconstruction. It has persisted in its decision to embark on a peaceful path to freedom and has not deviated from it. It has conducted difficult reforms while being undermined politically and financially. It has adopted the principle of one state, one government, one law, and one weapon. Palestine is a reliable partner for peace, if peace is the objective. Palestine is a reliable partner for peace if peace is the objective. The whole world can testify to that. But the Israeli government's objective is not peace, it is domination. Netanyahu yet again bragged that he will never allow a Palestinian state to emerge. He went further, reaffirming Israel will retain control from the river to the sea, promising eternal occupation, a delusional idea that will continue depriving our region of the prospects and promise of peace. Mr. President, the Palestinian people have an inalienable right to self-determination, including the right to the independence of their state. Any implementation of peace plans must uphold this right fully and unequivocally, and must preserve the unity and territorial integrity of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. There must be no administrative or legal, or I should rather say illegal, measures that entrench division and occupation instead of bringing an end to them. Mr. President, the best way to consolidate the ceasefire is to move towards a just peace. This requires the mobilization of the international community as a whole, in charting a clear path away from occupation and war towards shared peace, security, and prosperity as foreseen by the New York Declaration and supported overwhelmingly by the member states of these United Nations. We must all work together to advance these noble objectives. We welcomed the launch of Phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement and the establishment of transitional bodies to help administer Gaza in the transitional period ahead of reunifying the West Bank and Gaza Strip under the Palestinian Authority as stated by this Council. Palestine must be central to and fully represented in any processes that determines its future. We reiterate our readiness to work with the United States and regional and international partners to ensure respect for the ceasefire agreement in line with international law. Our people are waiting for the recovery and rebuilding promised to them after so much pain and loss inflicted on them. We cannot let them down. Palestine needs a just peace more than any other country because it suffers most in its absence. It is seeking a peaceful path to freedom. We are seeking a peaceful path to freedom. It should be encouraged and supported, not undermined. We want our rights, the rights accorded to all nations, nothing more, but also nothing less and nothing else. I repeat, we want our rights, the rights accorded to all nations, nothing more, but also nothing less and nothing else. Free Palestine, peace in the Middle East, and I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement. I'll now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to thank the briefer and welcome the ministers who joined us today and the new members of the Security Council. Mr. President, from the first day of the war in Gaza, Israel has been clear before this Council about its goals. We had two goals: every hostage home, Hamas disarmed. With the return of Ran Gvili, I can finally say that the first goal has been achieved. Every hostage been brought home. What many believed was impossible is now a fact. We said we would bring them home, all of them, no matter how long it took. Now, for the first time since 2014, there is not a single Israeli hostage held in Gaza. This achievement was secured by the brave soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces, young men and women who stepped forward with incredible determination, resolve, and courage. They defended our people. They brought our hostages home. They did so under fire, under pressure, and under relentless scrutiny, including from within this very chamber. Israel owes them a profound debt. The world owes them one as well. This effort was also driven and sustained by the leadership of the United States. The peace framework advanced by President Donald Trump and his administration created a path forward. Today, for the first time in 843 days, I sit in this chamber without the yellow hostage pin on my lapel. Everyone in Israel wore it, until yesterday. This is a moment of deep national significance for Israel. This moment also carries a message far beyond Israel. Western liberal democracies do not cave to terrorists. They do not reward mass murder. They do not trade their values for silence. The message is clear for every terrorist organization watching us. Kidnapping civilians does not bring legitimacy. Violence does not deliver political gains. Terror does not win. Israel now advances its second goal with the same determination and clarity. Hamas must be disarmed. The next steps are grounded in phase 2 of the peace plan, supported by Israel, key international players and partners, and this Security Council. Phase 2 is written. It is structured. It provides for the establishment of a responsible governing framework for Gaza. There are positive signs. However, one obstacle remains: Hamas disarmament. The choice now rests with Hamas. Acceptance of full disarmament enables progress. Refusal places full responsibility on Hamas for the consequences. Clarity is essential about what disarmament actually means. Disarmament does not mean staged handovers for cameras. It does not mean weapons hidden underground while promises are made above ground. There is no real disarmament until Hamas's military infrastructure is dismantled. That includes weapons, command centers, and terror tunnels. No economic rebuilding can take place while Hamas remains armed. No civilian future can exist while a terrorist army controls Gaza. A genocidal terrorist organization should not have any weapons. Hamas understands this reality. That is why it delays, that is why it deceives. But don't just take Israel's word for it. Hamas put this in writing. In the final days of last year, Hamas released this manifesto. Very impressive one. This document, a copy of which was sent to all of your missions this morning, removes all doubt about Hamas's real intentions. They wrote it. It wasn't us. In this document, it said very clearly, it rejects disarmament, it rejects giving up political power, it denies the atrocities of October 7th, it justifies and glorifies its mass murder. Hamas even boasts about its strategy and diplomacy. In its own words, it calls one of the achievements of October 7th the collapse, and I quote, of Israel's image as a Western democracy. That tells you everything. This is not the language of peace, even when dressed up as diplomacy. It is a roadmap for future violence. Do not fall into Hamas's playbook. Do not let its propaganda write your talking points. Hamas still remains heavily armed. let me show you the numbers. It still holds thousands of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and tens of thousands of Kalashnikov rifles. In total, Hamas still holds roughly 60,000 assault rifles. These weapons are used not only against us, against Israel, but against Gazans who oppose Hamas rule. This is not a movement preparing for peace. This is a terrorist army preparing for its next war. Israel has fully implemented phase 1 of the agreement. Since the beginning of the October ceasefire, the volume of aid has increased sharply. Let's take a look at the numbers. More than 33,000 trucks have entered Gaza since October 10, 2025. They delivered over 850,000 tons of food, 8,300 tons of medical supplies, more than 420,000 tents. Every week, more than 4,200 trucks enter Gaza. 12 field hospitals are operating today. Israel does not limit UN assistance and has invited agencies to increase daily deliveries. Israel has opened all major crossings into Gaza and earlier this week announced the reopening of the Rafah crossing. Aid is flowing, coordination continues. Mr. President, while attention remains fixed on Gaza, another crisis demands urgency. Iran. The Ayatollah regime is brutally repressing and murdering its own people. Behind 20 days of internet and telephone shutdowns and blackouts, civilians demanding freedom are executed, arrested, and silenced. Reports now indicate fatalities exceeding 30,000. That number should shock this council. Imagine for 1 minute a Middle East without this regime. Think about it for 1 minute. Billions of dollars would no longer be spent funding terror. Lebanon can regain its sovereignty finally from the claws of Iranian-backed Hezbollah. Syria could stop serving as an Iranian weapons corridor and move towards stability finally. Palestinians in Gaza and Judea and Samaria could focus on improving their lives instead of being trapped by armed radicals. The problem is not the people of the region. The problem is the regimes and militias that profit from chaos. Look at Yemen. Yemen offers another clear example of how the Iranian regime exports hate. The Houthis are not fighting over borders. They have no border with us. They have no border with the US. They have no border with most countries here. They are not fighting over land. Their flag tells the entire story. Look at the flag of the Houthis. That's what it says in Arabic. Allah Akbar, Al-Maut li-America, Al-Maut li-Israel, Alana al-Yahud, Al-Nasser lil-Islam. In English, God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse on the Jews, victory to Islam. That is the official flag of the Houthis. This is radicalism. It is insanity. That hatred did not originate in Yemen. It was cultivated, funded, and armed by Tehran. The Iranian regime diverted its own people's money to fund terror instead of providing basic needs. This is how the Iranian regime operates. It builds networks of violence and exports them across the Middle East and beyond. A regime that massacres its own people cannot be trusted to respect others. The world's most extreme regime must never obtain the world's most dangerous weapon. Israel has no hostility toward the people of Iran. Their courage is undeniable. Their struggle for freedom deserves support. Their future must be free of tyranny. Hope, however, is not a strategy. As Hamas is dismantled, the Iranian regime must be confronted with the same seriousness. The same clarity must apply. The same standards must hold. Israel's position is unmistakable. Every hostage was brought home. Hamas must now be dismantled completely. Gaza must be demilitarized and de-radicalized. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for this statement. I now give the floor to the members of the Council. I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Sarah Beslow Nyanti, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank the Somali presidency for convening this high-level debate and the briefers for their insightful interventions. Mr. President, Excellencies, the Middle East is not a distant theater of conflict. It is a central test of whether this Council can still shape outcomes rather than merely cataloging suffering. In the Middle East, we do not confront one crisis. We face a chain reaction of wars, reprisals, and unresolved grievances, each feeding the next. Liberia's own experience reminds us that silencing guns matters, but peace does not come from silence of the guns alone. It comes from choices made early, deliberately, and sustained over time. Mr. President, for millions in the Middle East, war is not an interruption of life. It is life itself. There are people who are born under bombardment, who learn adulthood under occupation or siege, and who will grow old without ever knowing what it means to live without fear. Entire lives, full lives, have been lived inside conflict from the first breath to the last. And nowhere is this tragedy more unforgivable than in the lives of children. Some babies die while trying to nurse from mothers whose bodies have nothing left to give. They die not from rare diseases or unavoidable fate, but from hunger, blockade, displacement, and decisions made far from their cries. This is not abstract. This is happening in real time. Children are growing up inside the wreckage of our choices. They inherit wars they did not declare, hatreds they did not choose, and borders drawn more fiercely than compassion. They carry the cost of adult power struggles because the international community has too often accepted delay, denial, and turning a blind eye as its policy. While children elsewhere worry about exams, football matches, music, friendships, and what they might become in the future, children in the Middle East learn how to stay safe during explosions and the best route to take to find food. They live in fear, not knowing what it means to be free. This is not only a moral failure, it is a strategic catastrophe that recycles violence, enmity, and hate. Mr. President, Excellencies, the reality of the Middle East is unfortunately grim, but the horizon beckons hope. Liberia notes recent diplomatic efforts aimed at reducing violence and reopening political space in Gaza and across the region. We applaud initiatives led by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, other regional leaders, and other stakeholders, which have helped to create momentum toward de-escalation, improved humanitarian access and dialogue. Progress, however, is fragile, but progress matters. Let's be clear, this momentum must be sustained. Therefore, Liberia encourages continued engagement with this Council and with all stakeholders to deepen the progress, seize every opportunity, and consolidate the gains already made. History shows that diplomatic openings will close inevitably, not because they are imperfect, but because they are abandoned. Mr. President, no conflict has more broadly defined the region than the one between Israel and Palestine. Liberia is concerned by this protracted conflict. We reiterate the urgent need for immediate and sustained de-escalation and for expanding humanitarian access that is predictable and safe. Liberia continues to support a negotiated two-state solution consistent with relevant Security Council resolutions. Security that lacks political legitimacy cannot endure. crisis management, however necessary, cannot substitute for a genuine peace process. Mr. President, Excellencies, force can dominate a moment, but only justice can shape a future. If force worked, we would not be here having this debate. What is not resolved through dialogue will resurface louder, angrier, and more dangerous. Hence, any solution must be shaped with the involvement of all concerned stakeholders. Mr. President and Excellencies, beyond Gaza, we are aligned by rising tensions along the blue line between Israel and Lebanon. We recall Security Council Resolution 1701 and support UNIFIL's stabilizing role. In Syria, humanitarian suffering continues amid political paralysis. Resolution 2254 remains the agreed framework for sustainable peace. Regional engagement must translate into a political movement that is inclusive, but not an acceptance of permanent stagnation. In Yemen, fragile steps toward de-escalation offer a chance that must not be squandered. Dialogue remains the only path that does not end in more deaths and destruction. Peace in the Middle East cannot be defined simply by what ends. It must be defined by what begins. Dignity, justice, and the freedom for people to build ordinary lives. It must offer a future where Jews and Palestinians, Christians and Muslims, Arabs and non-Arabs can live not only side by side, but together working in the same hospitals, trading in the same markets, studying in the same universities, protecting shared water sources, building businesses, and competing in ideas rather than arms. Finally, Mr. President, Liberia will close with the following. We call for expanded regular humanitarian corridors into Gaza and all conflict zones in the region. We urge support for confidence-building measures facilitated by UN peace-building measures, peacekeeping, regional partners' support. We encourage regional actors and international partners to sustain diplomatic momentum and avoid the collapse of current openings. We call on all stakeholders to support efforts that restore political legitimacy, governance capacity, and economic stability for both Israelis and Palestinians. And we stress the need to promote regional commitments to stop the use of children in conflicts and to shield schools and hospitals from attacks or misuse. Liberia stands ready to work with all council members for sustainable peace in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Nyanti for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Georgios Gerapetraidas, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the Deputy Special Coordinator for his briefing and welcome the new elected members of the Council. We're looking forward to working with all of you. Distinguished colleagues, as Greece continues its tenure on this Council, we do so with clarity of purpose and a strong sense of responsibility. At a time when the international system is facing profound challenges, the United Nations and the Security Council in particular continues to provide the central and indispensable framework for dialogue, cooperation, and collective action in support of international peace and security. Greece's foreign policy is firmly grounded in respect for the Charter of the United Nations and the principles enshrined therein: respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders, and the prohibition of the threat of use of force. These principles are not abstract ideals. They constitute the foundation of a stable international order and guide our collective work within this Council. Peace in the Middle East is an urgent moral, political, and humanitarian imperative. Greece consistently supports all initiatives that can have a tangible, positive impact on the ground and bring the region closer to a lasting peace and stability. In this spirit, we have strongly supported the comprehensive plans for Gaza and voted in favor of Security Council Resolution 2803. We acknowledge the progress achieved towards sustained ceasefire and the implementation of the 20-point Gaza peace plan endorsed by this Council. We have been very relieved that the body of the last hostage has been returned to his family. This development concludes a deeply painful chapter for the families. It also opens the path for the full implementation of Phase 2, which is a truly decisive moment. This next step must include full disarmament of Hamas and other armed groups, addressing Israel's legitimate long-term security concerns is a key precondition for sustainable peace. The nomination of a Palestinian National Committee for the administration of Gaza, with the support of the presidency of the Palestinian Authority, is a welcome development. It represents an important step towards legitimate and accountable governance, which is indispensable for stability, reconstruction, and long-term peace. The future reconstruction of Gaza must be credible, coordinated, and firmly anchored in legitimate governance structures and embedded in a broader political and credible political horizon. Gaza and the West Bank is a single, indivisible territorial unit for a future Palestinian state. The path forward is clear: a credible political process leading to a two-state solution, allowing Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side in peace and security. Greece stands ready to contribute actively and responsibly to the peace process, including through the scaling up of humanitarian assistance and the development aid in the West Bank. It continues to provide treatment to children from Gaza in Greek hospitals. We are also actively contributing to efforts aimed at stabilizing security conditions in Gaza, including through our participation in the Civil-Military Coordination Center. Overall, our objective is clear: to help prepare the ground for the day after in Gaza, in close cooperation with the Palestinian National Committee and the Palestinian Authority, as well as with key regional partners such as Egypt. Peace requires the protection of civilians. Today, despite significant progress on the delivery of food and other goods, the humanitarian situation in Gaza remains difficult. Harsh weather conditions, devastated infrastructure, and shortages of food, water, and medical supplies continue to exacerbate suffering. Humanitarian access, including via Cyprus Maritime Corridor, must therefore be unimpeded. We're also concerned with recent developments affecting UNRWA, notably the demolition of its facilities in East Jerusalem. Beyond Gaza, the situation in the West Bank is steadily deteriorating. Rising settler violence, including against Christian communities, erodes trust and fuels instability on the ground. We also call for a halt to settlement activities, including in the E1 area. As the Greek Prime Minister stated during his recent visit to Ramallah and Jerusalem, Greece's support for the Palestinian Authority is unwavering. It remains the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and as such must be empowered politically and financially. The Palestinian Authority has been very serious in promoting reforms. Withheld tax revenues must be released immediately. Equally, the preservation of the status quo of the holy sites in Jerusalem is of paramount importance. Jerusalem is not only a city of profound religious significance, but a litmus test for coexistence and mutual respect. Mr. President, turning to Lebanon, this Council's visit to Beirut last December was more than symbolic. It sent a clear message: Lebanon is not alone. We welcome the progress achieved in Phase 1 of the National Disarmament Plan, which brings Lebanon closer to restoring full control over its territory in line with relevant Security Council resolutions. Nevertheless, disarmament must be coupled with sustained capacity building as well as clear plan for reconstruction. Greece considers Lebanon as a key partner for peace. It will support Lebanon in its efforts for security and prosperity. It recently delivered military equipment to the Lebanese armed forces and stands ready to do more. In the same vein, we welcome the organization of an international conference in Paris on March 5, aiming at garnering international support toward the LAF, and we're looking forward to our participation. For Syria, Mr. President, 2025 has been a landmark year. The fall of the Assad regime gives a historic opportunity to a country of great importance for the Arab world and the Eastern Mediterranean. Greece stands by Syria and is offering support bilaterally and in its capacity as EU and Security Council member. We must acknowledge the progress achieved so far, but we should also not disregard the persisting challenges. We welcome the assurances by the Syrian government regarding adherence to international law and good neighborly relations. We expect them to be honored, especially in terms of maritime delimitations with neighboring states. Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity must be fully respected. We also support the country's engagement with the United Nations and warmly encourage its further enhancement, looking forward to the prompt establishment of the Office of the Special Envoy in Damascus. At the same time, we should not forget that 2025 was marked by violence against Alawites, Druze, Christians, and lately the Kurds. We need more information, clarity, and indeed accountability. We reiterate the need for an inclusive transition and protection of all Syrians, including women, without any discrimination whatsoever due to religious or ethnic background, as a prerequisite for stability and recovery. Syria's wealth lies in its diverse and pluralistic society. Civilians must be protected under all circumstances. The latest developments in the northeast prove how fragile the transition remains and causes concern. The ceasefire agreement reached between the Syrian government and the SDF should be fully implemented by all sides. We call on all actors, including external actors, to act with restraint and avoid escalation that could destabilize the country and exacerbate ethnic tensions. The protection of Kurds must be fully ensured and their political and cultural rights safeguarded in a united Syria. We would also like to underline the need to tackle terrorism and extremism and address the military and security sector reform. In particular, the fight against Daesh, ISIS should continue, and detainees camps must be fully safeguarded. Finally, on Yemen, we reaffirm our full respect for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, and we call upon all parties to engage constructively and in good faith in an inclusive, Yemeni-led and Yemeni-owned political process under the auspices of the United Nations. Despite the escalation in the south, we remain vigilant. While the situation in the Red Sea is becoming more complicated, we reiterate the importance of maritime security and freedom of navigation. The Red Sea constitutes a vital waterway for the region and the world, and the Houthis continue to pose a serious threat in this regard. Greece, honoring its long maritime tradition, will continue to support regional and international activities and provide her leadership to EU naval operation Aspides in line with Council resolutions and in full respect of international law. In conclusion, Mr. President, Greece remains fully committed to working with all members of this Council, with the United Nations and with regional partners to turn commitments into action so that hope prevails over suffering, dignity over despair, and peace becomes a reality delivered. As a country of the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece is deeply conscious of the direct impact that instability in the region has on international peace and security. This awareness, together with our long-standing commitment to multilateralism and international law, underpins our readiness to act as a constructive and reliable partner in efforts to promote dialogue, de-escalation, and lasting peace. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Jared Petraeus for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Deputy Special Coordinator Al-Akbarah, for your briefing. It was good to spend time with you late last year. Welcome to our colleagues, Your Excellencies of Foreign Ministers from Greece and Liberia. I think first and foremost, we should truly take heart that Ron Gavili's remains have finally returned to his family, who have suffered through unthinkable hardship for far too long. His funeral was today, and we hope his return brings a measure of solace and closure for the family that I also had the honor to spend some time with. And we are, I think we all hope, the remains of all the deceased are returned to their loved ones, those that were killed in this horrible war started by Hamas. so that these families can have some type of closure and peace. Colleagues, for the first time since 2014, in over a decade, Hamas and its terrorist affiliates no longer hold any hostages in Gaza. That's extraordinary, and we should take note of it. And I hope all those who claimed Hamas didn't know the locations of every hostage understand, frankly, their error. It is only due to the relentless efforts of the Israeli people and government, the tireless work of President Trump, his special envoys, Witkoff and Kushner, and the strong pressure put on Hamas, brought to bear by not only the United States, but our partners in the region, that all the hostages have at last returned home, and we could take those yellow ribbons off our lapels. Colleagues, on January 16th, President Trump celebrated the formation of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. For the first time since 2007, the people of Gaza who desperately want peace, and they want peace and not Hamas, its supporters or its enablers, they have an opportunity to chart a peaceful future for the Gaza Strip. We are grateful, deeply grateful, for Dr. Ali Sheikh's leadership of the National Committee and for our partnership with those serving alongside him to restore public services, to rebuild civil institutions, and to stabilize daily life in Gaza. Last week in Davos, President Trump announced the Board of Peace, and with it, the transition to phase 2 of the 20-point plan, both of which were established and endorsed by this committee in Resolution 2803. The results of phase 1 speak for themselves. A ceasefire that the entire world were begging for and demanding. Humanitarian aid that was so desperately needed. And the release and return of all hostages to their families. Phase 2 will advance the full demilitarization and reconstruction of Gaza in line with the President's plan and with Security Council Resolution 2803. On behalf of the United States, I would like to thank all those that have committed to joining the Board of Peace, especially fellow council members Bahrain and Pakistan. Under President Trump's chairmanship, the Board of Peace is acting and not just talking. With the President's vision and tenacity, the Board will help realize a new Gaza and a break from this decades-old cycle of violence. We realize it's unconventional. Change makes some uncomfortable. But with this innovative approach, we are leaving behind decades of wasted time, wasted money, and wasted chances for peace. And we are already seeing results. With the cooperation and assistance of Israel and our Board of Peace partners, over 55,000 trucks have entered Gaza, bringing food, shelter, and medicine since the ceasefire began. Over 1.3 million people have received food assistance in December. We welcomed the reopening of Allenby Gate and King Hussein Bridge, the crossing between Israel and Jordan, and we welcome the full reopening of the Rafah border crossing, which will expedite the flow of medical evacuations. But we must take care. Assistance cannot devolve into dependence, and with support from the High Representative for Gaza, Nikolai Mladinov, the National Committee will restore essential services throughout Gaza and foster an economy where opportunity replaces unemployment and dependence. But before we can reach this goal, Hamas and other militant groups must lay down their arms. Point 1 of the President's 20-point plan is that Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. They must live up to their end of the bargain. Point 2 is that Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered for far too long and from more than enough. Only de-radicalization, only disarmament, only demilitarization will bring Gaza prosperity and stability, and we, along with our partners on the Board of Peace and in consultation with the National Committee, will apply pressure to Hamas to honor its commitment and to disarm. Hamas must not have any role in the governance of Gaza directly or indirectly in any form, period. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. International, independent monitors will supervise a process of demilitarization of Gaza to include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and a peaceful coexistence with its neighbors. We salute and thank our friends who have agreed to contribute to the International Stabilization Force under the leadership of Major General Jasper Jeffers of the United States Army. The ISF will begin to establish control and stability so that the Israeli Defense Forces can withdraw from Gaza based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization. These will be agreed upon between the IDF, the ISF, the guarantors, and the United States with an objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to its neighbors or its citizens. Colleagues, the United States remains fully committed to working in close partnership with Israel, with key Arab and Muslim majority nations, and with the international community to bring the peace, the prosperity, and the security and dignity to the region that its people deserve. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statement and now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank Deputy Special Coordinator Alakbarov for his briefing, and I also join others in welcoming the foreign ministers of Liberia and Greece to the Council today.